And we're back for episode 2.5. Our episode begins with Renly and Catelyn hammering out a peace deal. The peace deal is essentially, Robb can call himself King of the North, but he has to swear fealty to Renly. It's actually a pretty lopsided deal, and we don't know if Robb would have actually accepted it. In the book, at least, Robb would maintain kingship over the Riverlands, so at least House Stark would increase their income. In the show, Renly is only offering Robb the North and the empty title of king. That's essentially nothing. Now, Catelyn again urges Renly to make peace with his brother. Again, in A Clash of Kings, Catelyn has become the smartest person in the world. In the book, she proposes that Stannis, Renly, and Robb call a great council of lords who will decide who the next king will be. That's right, Catelyn proposes democracy. Weirdly, Renly outright denies this request. This is a bit odd, as Renly is supposedly a really popular guy. Did he actually fear that either Stannis or Robb would win the vote? Or maybe he thought, why risk it? I have the biggest army. No, immediately after rejecting the democracy solution, Stannis' shadow, or his forbidden planet Id monster, kills Renly. I do wonder, what if Renly had accepted the solution? Would the Id monster still have killed him? So the death of Renly causes Brienne to Hulk out. In the book, 2 other Rainbow Guard members come in to attack Brienne. One of them is named Emyn Qui, and the other is Robar Royce. Robar is the brother of that Night's Watchman who dies in the very first scene of the show. What's odd is Robar is not from the Stormlands or the Reach. He's from the Vale, and yet for some reason he's serving Renly. It's very peculiar. Anyway, Catelyn convinces Robar that Brienne is innocent, and the two make off. Anyway, in our next scene, Loras is all mopey that Renly is dead. In the book, he's absolutely furious, and he kills Robar and Emyn in a fit of rage. And now it seems because Littlefinger was just lingering around the camp, he comes up with a scheme to marry Margaery to Joffrey. In the book, Tyrion comes up with the idea to marry Joffrey to Margaery, and Littlefinger then tricks Tyrion into sending him as the broker. Incidentally, is Margaery dressed up as a tamaki or an ice cream cone? So in our next scene, Tyrion and Cersei are discussing Renly's death. Sadly, one scene that doesn't make it into the show was Cersei and Tyrion's single moment of happiness together. In the book, there's a scene in which Tyrion tells Cersei that Stannis is fighting Renly, and it's really, really funny. The two celebrate and hug, and for a moment, they're loving siblings. Of course, it's fleeting, but it's a fascinating scene. Now in this scene, Tyrion and Cersei bicker a bit, and Tyrion attempts to show himself more intelligent by pointing out that plots and schemes are the same thing. Now the show does this a lot. It tries to make somebody intelligent by having them be a grammar Nazi. Less versus fewer, strategies versus tactics, this sort of thing. The book doesn't pull this stuff at all. What's kind of funny is that Tyrion is wrong here. Of course there's a difference between a plot and a scheme. A scheme is a more dishonorable plot. Anyway, Tyrion gets upset with Cersei because she's hiding her plan on how she's going to defend King's Landing. And so Tyrion has to find out from his spy, Lancel. Now in the book, Cersei doesn't hide her plan to use Wildfire very closely. Tyrion simply sees her talking to an alchemist and assumes something is up. Now Lancel is not exactly the most useful spy. He finds out 2 things for Tyrion in the book. 1, that Cersei is hiring 3 brothers called the Kettleblacks to defend her, and 2, she is trying to get Tommen out of the city to protect him. Tyrion counters these by paying the Kettleblacks as well, and telling the Goldcloaks to capture Tommen as he tries to leave. What's funny is the Kettleblacks actually work for Littlefinger, so they're getting triple pay. Additionally, both of these so-called problems are kind of Tyrion's doing. In the book, he sends Cersei's guards away, and in the book, he threatens to hurt Tommen to scare Cersei. Now next we are treated to this extra scene where Stannis is taking over Renly's men. Now Stannis says something odd in the show. He says he has all of Renly's bannermen except for the Tyrells. This is most certainly not the case in the book. In the book, Stannis generally has the Stormlords, but most, not all, but most of the Reacher Lords leave with the Tyrells. This most notably includes Sam's dad, Randyll Tarly, who is a great general. Now here, Davos convinces Stannis not to take Melisandre into battle. In the book, Davos stays silent while all the other Stormlords insist she doesn't come. It's the words of Bryce Caron that eventually sway Stannis. House Caron seems like a very loyal house, and in the end, a bastard from that house ends up with control of Dragonstone, mining obsidian that can be used against the others. Now in our next scene, we have Tyrion observing the preaching of a religious extremist. Now these extremists appear a bit in A Clash of Kings, and I do wonder about their fate. Early in A Clash of Kings, Varys warns Tyrion about these extremists and wants them arrested. However, Tyrion doesn't think very much of it and ignores the problem. Tyrion later runs into this preacher and realizes that the city is getting more dangerous. Now what's interesting is that Alliser Thorne then comes to town looking for men for the Night's Watch. The black cells are empty, so Tyrion tells Jacelyn Bywater to arrest more people. Now Bywater is Varys' agent, and Varys wanted the religious zealots arrested, so we should have seen a bunch of these religious zealots show up at the wall at some point. But we never do. Maybe they're hanging with Al-Ardim. Now next we are treated to this extra scene between Theon and some insubordinate Ironborn. Now in the book, the Ironborn don't really act like this. Yes, they rape, yes, they pillage, yes, they're crazy, but for the most part, they're fiercely loyal and follow orders. In the book, no one questions Theon's authority, except for maybe his uncle Aeron, who's along for the ride. Now last time I mentioned that House Botley and House Harlaw are very interested in Theon, and we find out that Theon's crew is filled with Harlaws and Botleys. Now in this scene, Theon meets Dagmare Cleftjaw. Now in the book, Dagmare is a very important character. He's essentially Theon's dad. While Balon was busy ruling, Dagmare ended up raising Theon and trained him. And it's very clear that Dagmare loves Theon as a son. This is significant as Dagmare ends up conquering a northern holdfast called Torrhen's Square. And he's still holding it. If anyone's going to rescue Theon out there, it's going to be Dagmare. Now here Theon just sort of stumbles upon the idea of attacking Winterfell. We aren't sure when he comes up with the plan in the book, but the timing is really significant. You see, I'd say it's an open question to whether or not dreams can actually predict the future. In the book, Jojen receives a dream about water coming to Winterfell. In the show, it's Bran. So when did this dream occur? Before or after Theon had the idea? The Bran chapter is placed before the Theon chapter, but we don't really know which is chronologically first. Can the dream sender really predict the future? Or do they just notice Theon's movements? Or can they enter Theon's head and know his thoughts? Or can they actually give Theon the notion in the first place? Now next we're treated to this extra scene between Arya and Tywin. Tywin is discussing the war with his men and outs Arya as a northerner. In the book, Arya never gets this close to Tywin. Instead, she hears really weird stories about how Tywin wants to restore Harrenhal to its full glory. The stories even claim that Tywin wants to make it his permanent seat. I'm not really sure what to make of these stories. Tywin might just be trying to scare people, or perhaps he was seduced by Harrenhal like other characters in our story. Or perhaps Harrenhal has some sort of secret power that we don't know about. Of course, if that's the case, why did Tywin ever abandon Harrenhal? Now next, Arya runs into Jaqen H'ghar, who is now a Lannister man. Somehow, he joined Amory Lorch's forces. And in the book, Rorg, a noseless psychopath, and Biter, a feral man, joined as well. These three men seem to have the ability to blend in. How these men did this, and if it's a general skill of faceless men, is unknown. Now Jaqen tells Arya that she saved 3 lives, and therefore Jaqen needs to kill 3 people. Now one can understand why he wouldn't want to kill himself, but why wouldn't he kill Rorg and Biter? Wouldn't that pay 2/3 of the debt? It definitely seems like Rorg and Biter are his men, and he wants them alive. It should be noted that there are several things that Jaqen does that are in opposition to the teachings of the House of Black and White. The House is very much against stealing and collateral damage. Jaqen participates in both. Additionally, Jaqen seems to fear death, even though death is supposed to be a relief. Jaqen also says he's paying a debt to the Red God. Now yes, perhaps R'hllor is a facet of the Many-Faced God, but it's odd that he calls him the Red God. That's usually a name that non-followers call R'hllor. Now in our next scene we have the men of the Night's Watch at the Fist of the First Men. Now the Fist of the First Men is not nearly as desolate in the book. This so-called fist is simply a bare hill that sticks out of the forest. Now if you look closely, you'll see a weird ring of stones. This is the remains of an ancient ring fort of the First Men. In the book, this fort is bigger and in better shape, with its walls making it up to somebody's chest. Now, ring forts in our world were usually small forts located in medieval Irish farming communities that gave brief protection against animals and raiders. They didn't have the ability to keep people safe for an extended period of time like a holdfast, but they were good against a quick attack. What the First Men were doing with these forts is unknown. The area doesn't seem very good for farming, and the fort doesn't seem large enough for territorial defense. If I were to guess, these ring forts were used as watchtowers for incoming armies or the others. Now in our next scene we have Tyrion meeting with the Alchemists about Wildfire. Now the Alchemists are actually an older order than the Maesters, and they claim they have all sorts of secrets besides Wildfire. However, Tyrion doesn't really want to hear about them, so I guess they'll remain a mystery. By the way, this actor is Roy Dotrice, the guy who narrates the audiobooks. He was also one of the stars of George R. R. Martin's series Beauty and the Beast. Now it should be noted that it was Cersei's idea to use Wildfire against Stannis, and Tyrion then adds to the plan, including things like much needed safety precautions. So really, although they hate each other, in a way it's the cooperation of Cersei and Tyrion that ultimately saves King's Landing. Now next we have Dany's plot, which has strayed pretty far from the book. Here one of Dany's dragons is burning and eating meat. Again, without Viserys telling stories to Dany about dragons, her dragons would have starved. Now it should be noted that the dragons in both the book and the show have only 2 legs and no arms. According to George R.R. Martin, he wanted to be scientifically accurate about this. In the real world, there are no 4-legged winged animals. So in the next scene, Dany attends a party with her new dress. In the book, Qartheen dresses actually show a woman's boob. For some reason, HBO decided to not have this be part of Qartheen culture. At the party, she runs into 3 characters, who in the book are the 3 characters who led her out of the desert. They are Pyat Pree, Xaro, and Quaithe. And it seems Pyat wants to kill her, Xaro wants to embrace her, and Quaithe wants to send her on her way. In both the book and the show, Pyat wants Dany to come to the House of the Undying, though in the show he does this neat little magic trick. Now in the show, Xaro laughs off Pyat Pree, but in the book, he furiously hates him. Now Xaro is gay in the book, but he desperately wants to marry Dany and sail with her east. Now Jorah believes that Xaro simply wants one of Dany's dragons, but let's also remember that Jorah wanted to take Dany east as well. All of a sudden, Jorah doesn't want to go to Asshai, despite pushing it so much in the first book. Now finally, Quaithe appears. Now Quaithe is almost certainly the person that's been sending Dany dreams, or at least one of the people. And we know this because stars whisper to Dany when she talks to Quaithe and when she has her dreams. Now here in the show she only talks to Jorah, but in the book she actually talks to Dany herself. She essentially tells Dany 3 things. 1, she tells her not to trust anyone. 2, she tells her that magic is returning because of her. And 3, she cryptically tells her, to go north you must go south, to reach the west you must go east, to go forward you must go back, and to touch the light you must pass beneath the shadow. Now next we catch up with Brienne and Catelyn. Brienne doesn't really know what to do with herself, so she decides she wants to go kill Stannis. Cat convinces Brienne that that's a really stupid idea and suggests serving Robb. However, Brienne doesn't know Robb, so she decides to swear fealty to Cat. Now many people overlook this, but there's a very important vow that both the book and the show have. Cat vows to Brienne that she will never ask her to do anything that will bring her dishonor. Meanwhile at Winterfell, we find out that Torrhen Square is being attacked by the Ironborn. Bran falls into the trap and sends men to defend Torrhen Square. Now what's kind of interesting is that Dagmar Cleftjaw was only given a very small force. He was never supposed to take Torrhen Square, he was only supposed to lure men away from Winterfell. Somehow, Dagmar won and ended up taking Torrhen Square, and after 4 books, is still holding it. And in this scene, Bran tells Osha that he had a dream that water would come to Winterfell. In the book, Jojen Reed is the one that has this dream. Now next we meet Qhorin Halfhand. Now Qhorin is a mighty suspicious character. First off, Qhorin is way too interested in Jon, recognizing him immediately and telling him he knew Ned and Jon's granddad, Rickard. Why a ranger from the Shadow Tower would be hanging in Winterfell is unknown. Qhorin also constantly spews stuff about the old gods being the gods of the Starks, and Jon having the blood of Winterfell. Now in the book, Qhorin is late showing up, and the reason he's late is he claims he captured some wildlings and tortured them to find information out about Mance. The captive told him that Mance was gathering a host in the Frostfangs and searching for a magical item. However, Qhorin says the captive died before he could tell him what the item was, and he thinks the captive probably didn't know in the first place. Of course, the magical item is the Horn of Winter, and this was not exactly a tightly kept secret. Ygritte was blabbing all about it, so it's really hard to believe that these prisoners died before revealing the Horn of Winter plan. In fact, Qhorin's torturer, Eben, is supposedly an expert in making men give up information. So what is Qhorin up to? Why didn't he tell Mormont about the Horn of Winter? Well, in the show, Mormont wants to get rid of Mance's lookouts and wants to possibly assassinate Mance. Qhorin is sent to do this, and Jon volunteers to join Qhorin. However, in the book, this is completely different. Mormont wants to find out what the magical item is. Qhorin volunteers to go into the Frostfangs to find out and requests that Jon come along. That is, Jon and his wolf. Now it should be noted that the Frostfangs are devoid of trees. This means that Bloodraven and the Children of the Forest are blind there. They have no idea what Mance is up to. However, with Ghost heading into the area, Bloodraven would once again have eyes. Now next we are treated to this extra scene where Xaro shows off some of his wealth and shows Dany a really big vault. Now in the show, Xaro is feigning his wealth, but in the book there's no doubt that Xaro is a very, very rich man. Dany lives in one wing of his vast mansion, and he owns 83 ships plus a pleasure barge. And next we're treated to this extra scene where Dany and Jorah debate whether or not she should marry Xaro and buy an army to invade Westeros. Now it should be noted that it takes about 6 months for information to get from the Seven Kingdoms to Qarth. However, the second book takes place over about 6 months, while the second season takes place over about a year. And so Book Dany and Show Dany end up with different information in Qarth. Book Dany only hears about Robert Baratheon's death, while Show Dany knows that 4 kings are fighting for the throne. And in our final scene, the Tickler has fallen to his death because Arya named him to Jaqen. Now in the book, the person that Arya names is named Chiswick. Every night Arya prays for Chiswick's death because he thinks he's funny when he's not. Chiswick eventually tells a story about how he and the Mountain's men raped a girl at an alehouse. Arya then decides that Chiswick needs to die. Not that Chiswick isn't evil, but it was the Mountain that initiated the rape. So if you really think about it, the Mountain should be the one getting named. It really shows how fickle and morally off Arya is. Chiswick's sense of humor is the thing that really gets him killed, not his crime. Now the show has Jaqen H'ghar as the murderer, but in the book it's probably Rorg. Chiswick is thrown to his death, which is probably something a large person would do. And the eventual second murder is done by Biter, so it seems that Rorg and Biter are paying their debts, just like Jaqen is. Whatever Rorg and Biter are, they seem to be followers of the many-faced god. And that's all for episode 2.5. See you in episode 2.6.